How was your weekend?
Good, man. Last night took the kids to the park. It was actually, yesterday and today are supposed to be awesome days. So
Yeah.
plan on going outside and enjoying some of this weather because it's not freaking
rainy
or Hades.
Yeah. You don't need to like take a butter knife outside to cut through the moisture. It's pretty, it's pretty nice actually. That's why we're gonna go up to Gettysburg. We're only about maybe 30 minutes.
Okay.
So we're gonna go up there and hang out for a while and just kind of relax.
Yeah.
It's because it's Sunday.
Yeah.
And why not?
Yep. Yeah. Today's a grocery day for us, so we'll be hitting all the groceries, and
that's like every 2 days for us. My kids go through. My wife and I were just talking about this. My kids go through a gallon of milk every day and a half.
Oh my god!
Every day and a half, a gallon. So we're it's insane. We're going to the grocery store like every 2 days or whatever.
I mean, that's a good thing.
It is,
nonetheless.
And I hated milk growing up.
Did you really?
I hated it. I was a Kool-Aid kid.
Oh, right on.
I drank Kool-Aid.
Right on.
Because it's so versatile. You can make popsicles from it.
This is true. This is true.
Right?
Yeah.
All different flavors. Plus, it had that awesome jug guy who used to burst through the walls.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, man. Absolutely.
I was a kid going, I want to be like him when I grow up.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So it's never really into the milk thing.
Yeah. I had to have my milk was for my cereal. That's
You're still a cereal guy.
Heck yeah, man. Every morning.
That's right. What is it, Captain Crunch?
No, Lucky Charms, man.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Lucky Charms. See, I was boring. I'm Cheerios.
Yeah, I wasn't into the chair. I had to have some funk to it. It's still funky. I really sit there and go, I can't believe I still eat this shit.
Isn't it amazing how those companies can kind of control us? Because I don't know one person on the planet who does not do the following: read the cereal box as you eat. I know you do it, right? Yeah. As you're eating, and you've seen that cereal box a million times. You have to read it.
Yeah.
Why? We have to read it. It's mind control.
Yeah, it is.
There's something in it.
Yeah. I miss the prizes, man. I want my prize.
Yeah, we had to eat everything to get to. See, now they're crafty. Now they put the prizes on top. Did you know that? In the cereal boxes, if you get it, if you buy one today, like when we were kids, you got to dig through that bastard just to get to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You had it was like commitment to that cereal. You had to either eat it or dump it.
That's true. Or open it from the bottom.
Oh, I was never that creative. I was like, damn it, I got to get this thing.
Oh, man. Good old days. How things have changed.
I know.
Actually, now, if you want your toy, you have to scan it or do some kind of barcode or something like that. And then you got to go log into this site and be able to blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what? Come on, man.
Yeah, I miss, there are certain things about being a kid I miss, certainly. And it's strange. I don't think, were you into music as a small kid? Or was there a certain age where you just kind of got into it and said the switch was flipped and that was it for you? For me, I had very little interest in music until probably maybe 7 years old.
Yeah, that's about the same as
when you came in.
It's about the same as me. Yeah, it was 4th grade. I was introduced to the snare drum, and from there it was just lights out. I mean, it was music from there on. But up until that point, no, I don't remember music playing a huge role. I mean, mom and dad always had vinyl playing or something like that. And I remember kind of looking at the album covers, but never that whole sitting down and really immersing myself didn't come till, like you said, 7, 8 years old.
Yeah. And for me, it was the sports thing. I tried that.
Oh.
And I realized I just sucked at it. And so I had to get into something different. Like when I was playing Little League, I'll never forget it. Or maybe it was whatever comes before Little League. Maybe it was the T-ball or something. I don't know, one of those things.
Right.
And my dad was a great baseball player. He actually played a shortstop in high school ball. And but for me, it just never translated. I remember, so one game I'm sitting there and they actually put me on first base, and it was like a mistake because I'm sitting there and I catch the ball, and everybody's yelling at me saying, "Get the bag, hit the bag, hit the bag," and I'm looking around going like, "What bag? Like I don't see a bag. I'm looking actually for like a grocery bag."
Right.
And meanwhile, everyone was like scoring runs on us, and that was it. I was done. I went home. I said, "No more sports."
This doesn't make sense.
I don't understand this. I'm trying to I have to pull the whiteboard out. Where's the bag? I don't understand the translation of bag to plate. It doesn't make any sense to me, you know?
Right.
Yeah. And then I was like, shortly after that, I'll never forget this. Like my cousin Joe Grillo, who used to babysit me and my sister at that age, brought over. I'll never forget this. He played guitar, but he played Gibson. Right? He hated Fender. In fact, he used to say that Fenders were like, cars. You just couldn't get into what a Fender Strat was like. It was just, personal preference. He was a Gibson guy. So I'm like 7 or 8 years old, and he's watching us on a Saturday, and he comes in, and I don't think you've ever seen this guitar before. I've never seen it after this. It looked like a flying V, but the tail end of it looked like Pac-Man. It was a Gibson. It was really, really weird. I probably should go on the net and see if I can find what this body style was called, or his particular model. But imagine like Pac-Man. It's like the rounded and cut, right? And then where the neck kind of bolted in, it was like a flying V body, right? Really square. Okay. And then the rest of it, just a regular Gibson. I think the headstock probably looked like a flying V headstock from what I remember. It's been many years. But anyway, he comes over and he pulls this thing out of the case, and it was like the light is shining out of the case, Right. And he plays, and I'm like, holy shit, what is that? Yeah. That was it. I was on the trek, but then unfortunately I started on acoustic, and that was a hard couple of years because starting out in guitar education with books, and a guitar that's bigger than you with action, you could probably put a stop block between the fret and the strings, which was really difficult. So but that was the start of it for me.
So you started out on an acoustic? Did you start out on steel or nylon?
It was steel. Yeah, it was steel. It was a rental from the music store where so after Joe introduced me to guitar, I said to my father, I said I want to play, and he said, all right, well, if we're gonna invest money in lessons, you're gonna do it the right way. Right. And of course back then, who knew how certain things work. Like my cousin didn't go along with me and kind of like, hey, pick this guitar out. It was just like my dad took me down to the store, and they met the teachers and stuff. And he said, well, if you want to play the right way and build your hand strength, crush walnuts, start an acoustic. Well, that's what I did, and it was just awful. So it was this rental. It was probably a dreadnought body style.
Right. Naturally.
Okay. But you remember something, I'm like 8 years old, so I'm really, really small. My hands are tiny. I couldn't get my fingers on the strings and produce any kind of tone. Remember when Arjo was talking about that a couple weeks ago or whenever, about being able to kind of produce sound from the guitar and getting motivated by that. None of that was there for me. So I really struggled with an acoustic. And I think it was like a year after that where I said to my dad, "Can I have an electric?" And he bought me a Squier. It was a Squier. It was a Fender Bullet, actually, a Fender Bullet. Yeah. It was like, black with the white pick guard. And that was awesome, because then when I had that, I was like, okay, now what do I do with this thing? It just kind of gave me the incentive to go ahead and start learning licks. And like I said, the first riff I ever learned was Heaven and Hell by Sabbath. Just got the cassette, popped it in, figured the riff out, and that's what sold it for me. I was into it.
Yeah. Yeah,
which is really, even today, like you're a big acoustic fan, are you not? Do you love acoustic guitar?
I do. I really enjoy acoustic guitar. Not as much as I used to. It's honestly been a while since I picked up my Taylor. But yeah, absolutely. When I was younger, I mean, it was a toss up between the electric and the acoustic. I definitely went through a phase, probably when I was around 14, 15 years old, where Eric Clapton and the whole Unplugged album came out, and that was a huge influence on me. I mean, that was
a great record.
It was beautiful.
Great record.
So that was like a huge phase for me, where I kind of dove right into the acoustic guitar and kind of studied it quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing quite like the acoustic, that's for sure.
Yeah, but you know what? It was funny. I was having this talk with a colleague of mine who plays sort of recreationally. He's like, I don't know if I should get another acoustic or what, or I want to get an acoustic electric. I said, what do you want to do? He goes, I just want to kind of play. I said, do you want to go out and do gigs or anything? He says, no, I'm not into the gigging thing. I just want to sit in my room and play. And I kind of told him, this was my advice, to stay away from acoustic electric, or to kind of get a sense of what the natural sound of the wood does in acoustic. Because for me, the one thing I don't really like nowadays is the sound that kind of comes out from a plugged in pickup on an acoustic. I don't know how you feel about this, but I think it really sort of misrepresents the actual tone of what an acoustic steel string is supposed to sound like. Right. Like I go and see these guys play these little duos and things live, and they're plugged in from their piezo pickup into the PA, and it's really poppy. You know what I mean? Like every attack is really kind of snappy, like a rubber band kind of snapping. Right. And for me, like when I think of acoustic, I don't like that. I like more of a natural kind of sound coming from it. So I would much rather, I even told him, I said, Paul, if you ever want to like do that, just get regular acoustic and mic it. I found more success in that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's a funny animal because I know exactly that direct plug-in. It's not the same. That's for sure. Obviously you can play with the EQ a bit, and a lot of that also has to deal with, if you're playing in a live event, dealing with the sound man, and whether or not he knows what he's actually doing. But yeah, I totally get that very much.
Yeah, I think even with EQ, I think it feels like a processed acoustic string. And this is probably just me being, kind of a nerd and a dork here, musically, but I just like analog sounds.
Yeah, I know you were talking in your lesson with your student, and analog is I don't know if it's just because we were brought up in that time, and now kids would obviously be prone to digital, and they may not see it the same way. But there's something about analog that's although nowadays they're getting quite close with reproducing, like use the Kemper or something like that, where they use these amp modeling software or whatnot like that. It's getting really close. 10, 15 years ago, it was terrible, and there was no debate about it. But now, if you put a Kemper next to an actual amp of any sort, it's pretty damn close. And then actually within the mix, you can't really even tell because there's so much going on. But having said that, I just love analog. There's some kind of warmth that comes from it. There's some kind of body that's in it that you could just tell. You can hear the difference between how, again, I don't know. Now it's getting to be debatable, and I imagine 5-10 years from now, analog will just not be needed. It's more of a, I don't know. I mean, I think with the way that like the Kemper is, if I were an up and coming musician now, I would probably go with a Kemper, just because it's really small, it's easy to use. There's no loading with half stacks and all that kind of stuff, which, by the way, there's no need for half stacks.
Yeah, correct.
But yeah, I mean, it's just really easy now to be able to do all of that. It's the convenience factor. It's just like with everything else. But yeah, I think analog is it's where it's at. There's nothing like sitting there with an old deluxe, or make it scream and get those, even harmonics that are going on, and be able to kind of really make that thing sing. There's nothing like a tube amp. Solid state's a little bit different, but man, I love just cranking up a tube amp and just letting it sing, man. Oh,
I completely agree. I hear what you're saying. Analog, for me, this is one of the reasons why, if I had to play acoustic today, I would have to use nylon, because I mean, there's something about a nylon guitar that I just think is great. It's got this kind of, for me, kind of airy, magical kind of quality to the string. They weren't so damn hard to keep track of and care of, because they have the right humidity for them, and
Yeah.
they have to tie the strings the right way, and they're always stretching going on tune. They're really hard to maintenance, I think.
Yeah.
And at least in the very beginning, but once you got them, holy crap, man, they're great. I love the sound of them.
Yeah. I never really got into nylon. It wasn't really until recently till I picked up one. So I've always enjoyed them, and their sound, and the actual feel behind underneath your right hand is wonderful.
Yeah, they're soft. They're
Yeah.
they're very soft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always been a steel string and mostly electric guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I love my Kiesel. I was watching that video, that lesson that we recorded, and I was really surprised how much power comes out of that guitar. Because I don't know if I told you this before, but that Kiesel is actually channeled. It's like inside the body. There's two channels that they cut into the wood, so it works as a semi-hollow, which is really neat, because like it was constructed mainly for fusion and for different jazz styles. So it's apparently a really versatile axe. I just, I don't play out with it. I should. And I think next time I kind of do something, I'm going to bring like a nice little combo amp, because we don't do stacks.
Right.
No stacks in this house.
No, there's no need for a
The old guys can't carry them.
Well, I mean, I wish I could have gone back to my younger self and slapped myself upside the head and say, "What are you? Yeah, what are you doing? Like, come on,
that extra work. You're sweating before you play it."
Right. I mean, I get it, but no, there's just no need for it. That's it. I mean, quarter stack, you're good. That's it.
Combo.
Yeah,
combos.
combo.
I love combos. And I'm sure there's probably debate, raging out there about, is there any kind of, difference between having the head, kind of just plugged into a cabinet or something. I don't think so, right? I mean, for me, I just think it's as long as the amp sounds good. And I got to be honest with it, the older I get, the more I'm really into the tube combos.
Yeah,
just hearing the warmth of a tube.
Yeah,
it's great. Man.
There's I don't know. There's, especially in a venue where you're playing to, most venues are a couple hundred people max, and that's if you're a pretty decent band. There's just no need for something like that. Plus, if you got a sound guy, heck, you could be playing on a little guy if you wanted to.
Although, one gig would be great, just as a joke, to kind of bring in like 8 cabinets,
right?
Just to load and hook them all up,
right.
With like 3 heads.
Oh gosh! Oh man!
And they're not dummy cabs either.
Right.
So,
the wall.
Look at the sound guy. Good luck.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, you thought you were gonna have problems with the drummer. Yeah. It's amazing, some of these. I mean, the one thing that the experience that I've had over years in gigging and whatnot like that, it's and watching people on YouTube or going to see people live, it's amazing how people just don't understand that they're playing to a room, and understanding the acoustics, and understanding how you need to level match with the rest of your bandmates. And there's a whole thing that happens, and a lot of people even the experienced ones have a tendency to just kind of go up there and think about me, and this is my band, but at the same time it's me, and here I go. And there's a whole process that has to happen to make sure that you guys sound good together as a unit, and that just kind of is overlooked quite a bit. It's pretty amazing.
It all goes back to this training we give our students. I mean, I think it was, we mentioned last time, these are things that we don't talk about.
Right.
So we should in the studio. And I think, we probably have, you and I, over the years, kind of, dropped little snippets of this kind of wisdom into our students, and the ones that kind of are not playing professionally, learn from that. But I think it's really got to be drilled in from day one. Say it's not okay to crank your amp to 9.
Right.
Right. Be aware of the musical space around you, and and who's occupying what space, and teaching about frequencies and who stays where. And that's I think it's important stuff. I wish I never got that training. Did you? in
No.
studio work? No,
No.
that's just I just never became part of it. It's always about, here's how you play. Let's play some riffs today.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I mean, especially the live setting is because most oftentimes your instructor's not going to talk to you about that. Studio guys aren't going to really talk about a live setting. Um, it's all trial and error, and I wish there were somebody out there, us, yes, um, to talk about that kind of stuff. I mean, that's extremely important. How much just okay, well, you can't, especially guitarists. Okay, so you can't hear yourself. The number one thing that I would do in that situation, now that I know, is buy myself an angled stand. If you can't hear
Yeah, yeah,
yourself, don't turn up. Buy yourself an angled stand so now that your amp is more directed towards your ear. Now I can actually hear what's going on. I don't have to blow, the people who are in the front row out of the water, or,
yeah.
I don't have to piss off my other guitarist because he's like, holy cow, you keep on turning up. Um, that there's no need for that. The other thing is then, okay, if maybe the other option B would be angle your cabinet a different direction, because right now you're getting a reflection that you may not be able to hear. Try to angle it in a different way that maybe you can actually hear something. There's all kinds of tricks that you can use within a space to kind of hear yourself a little bit more. Maybe step away from the drummer and position yourself a little bit differently than you normally would, because the drummer obviously has a lot of high frequencies that are going to pull away from the guitar cabinet and you being able to hear that.
I agree. Did you watch the session with Alton? I think you did, right? You went through parts of it.
Absolutely.
He talked about some of this in his own, his own band, and the more I think about what he had said and reflecting on it, yeah, it's really for me a big deal. I think the curriculum for guitar study needs to be overhauled. I think completely.
Yep.
What we're doing today, I think, is really old. It's antiquated. It's got to be kind of revised to include lessons in acoustics. How sound works. The one thing I talked about with him was like when I was thinking about the Zappa article I read when Zappa was working with or thinking about Varèse's compositions, and how these guys realized that sound waves are real physical things that travel through space. We don't think about that. We just play. We hear the brain processed effect of music in our ear, right? And it sounds awesome. I love the lick, but we're not thinking about the fact these are actually physical properties that move around us. So that has to be part of our curriculum. There's no question about it.
Yeah, one of the best. I think when I start talking about acoustics, most students kind of have this little hazed view of of what I'm talking about.
That's
So
like theory.
yeah, right, exactly. So I usually rely on a visual. I really, really, really enjoy the idea of cymatics and how sound can move things. And so there's the plates where they put sand or salt on and they resonate the plate to a specific frequency.
Right? Patterns emerge,
and patterns start
yeah.
happening, and you start understanding these ideas of standing waves. And I talk to a lot of people about how if you're in a venue or a concert or something like that, and you're standing in a position and you can just hear this one bass tone that just keeps on hitting and it's like ringing your ear, or maybe it's a guitar, some specific note that's just wow, that one specific note is like really, really, really loud. And all I kind of tell them and I show them within this kind of visual is those nodes are happening, and what you're doing is you're standing in one of those nodes. That's where there's a big buildup going on, and all you have to do is sidestep, usually with lower frequencies. It's a little easier because the wave is much bigger, so all you have to do is just sidestep by a foot or two, and all of a sudden that note is gone, and you no longer have that. Higher frequencies, because the wave is so much shorter, it's a little bit harder, but nonetheless all you have to do is just kind of move around a little bit.
Okay,
it's all gone.
So for the people who are listening today, right, that don't have this background, can you just like quickly, elucidate what a standing wave is? I mean, you kind of gave some good overviews, but like, how does it work? So
standing wave is when, okay, you have a signal that has produced, and then because we have reflective surfaces all around us, it bounces off of that surface and then comes back on itself. depending on the dimensions of the actual room. Square rooms are the worst, especially with modern houses today. Most rooms are going to be a square 10 by 10 by 10 or 8 by 8 by 8, something like that. And that's the worst kind of room you can have. You're going to have a lot of that same frequency bouncing back on itself and then building up. You have a building up of a waveform that just kind of, I don't know.
Gains energy and momentum because it's like a feedback kind of thing. And
Absolutely,
yeah,
100%.
yeah.
It kind of reminds me, if you look up on YouTube, there's a bridge where or maybe it's I don't know if they actually have a video of this, but it's been documented where they had a marching band cross a suspension bridge, and that constant pulse to them marching starts this actual harmonic, this wave that actually starts to happen, and it actually gets to a point where this bridge actually breaks because it keeps on feeding on itself. So the power of sound and this power of frequency is huge. It's a lot bigger than we ever can imagine. It's pretty interesting.
We have to, yeah, no, and I don't think we have to become like equation guys, right? No. But we have to understand how the physics works. I mean, even as something as simple as, and I know I've done this. When I first learned about it, I was like, this is really cool. Controlling feedback on your guitar to produce musical tone, right? How many times have we done that? So like if you crank the amp really hard, for those that don't know what we're talking about, you get your pickups in front of your amp, you crank your amp up, and you hold it at certain angles to the amp, the cone of the amp, you produce a certain pitch on the feedback. Well, what people don't realize that if you move the guitar in certain positions, you can actually change the pitch of the feedback, which you can use musically. Satriani used to do it all the time. Just getting a note, kind of let it resonate and hold on there, and then move to a different side of the stage, and do that. And that could become a musical phrase idea. So knowing how that physics kind of applies to sound wave is, come on, it's just a different tool in your belt.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to become experts in this stuff, but I think it's extremely important that you're at least aware of it. It's going to help you out as a musician. And it'll be able to help you out in any situation where you walk into any venue with your bandmates and be able to kind of control the situation. In-ears is a good way to go as well. But that's if you're getting to the point where your band is a little bit more professional. Most bands who start off aren't going to be able to do that, but it's extremely important to know about all these things. Helps you out. You have to be careful, but in my experience, sound guys are not trained, and they're usually going from what limited experience they have, and that's okay too. I mean, you got to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere. If you go into school for acoustics, usually you're going to be working within studios or a controlled environment. That's the problem with live sound, is it's not a controlled environment and it's something new all the time. And that's the headache for a live sound guy, is because even if you are at the same venue all the time, bands react differently. This lead singer's up on the freaking mic, like eating it, and then every time he goes to shout at the crowd, he dips the microphone down straight at the wedges in front of you, and you get this massive feedback, and you're like, ugh. So it's every band is different, and I get that, but again, this all has to deal with making sure that you know your instrument and making sure you know how it reacts within a given environment, and whether you're the guitarist, bassist, drummer, or the singer. You kind of have to, I mean, drummers, I constantly tell drummers in a live situation, even where I work, look, any person out in the lobby, if they're going to hear one instrument from the front to the back of the building, they're going to hear one sound, and that's the drums, and usually the snare or the cymbals, because that's what cuts through.
Yeah, right.
Even soundproofed walls, that frequency just because
cuts right through things.
So you don't have to kill the drums. You just don't. There's no need for it. Lay back. You're going to conserve your energy. It's just like with guitar, localization and keeping things small. Don't do wide things. Yeah, I get, Pete Townsend in the whole, windmill and all that kind of stuff, and that's fun. But really, ultimately, the closer you can get to your instrument, be it guitar or drums, the more controlled that you're going to have, and especially within a 3-hour show and doing, let's just say, conservative 150 shows a year, you're going to want to be able to make sure that by the end of that show or the end of that tour, that you still feel physically good. You're going to wear yourself out, and you're going to start doing, bad habits. So keeping that small localized motion is going to help you out so much. It's so important.
It's just a general awareness, right, of things. I remember Michael McDonald. I love that singer. I know his voice, right, all through the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, he's so distinctive. What we all wish we have and are playing, right? And I remember watching him do, I think it was a 4th of July performance when he's playing in Washington. And you're talking like probably had professional sound guys doing these kinds of venues, and he's at the piano singing, and like every phrase he's moving away from the mic in mid pitch, and you can hear it cut in the microphone. He's like, so he's singing something, he kind of just moves his head around like that, and it really was distinctive. Like you hear these dips in it. Yeah. It's a professional singer shouldn't be doing that, right? That must have been a nightmare for the guy who's behind the board, trying to mix it, because you'd hear these drops in the volume. Right. But that was so it's interesting. Even the professionals do that.
Absolutely, yeah. Again, I think it's a lack of education
and attention to things.
Yeah. I mean, back then you really didn't have, you didn't have the internet or anything like that, and you didn't have wide circles of musicians talking to each other. So that information was not readily available. And especially if you were someone of stature, you're certainly not going to walk up to them and be like, you need to work on your vocal technique.
Yeah. You know what I mean? I'll stay on the diaphragm of the mic.
Right. I mean, so
what are you talking about?
Right. So you talking about rewriting the curriculum
that was
would be a great
impression, by the way. I do better ones.
Right.
I do Kermit the Frog pretty well.
So yeah, I think there's definitely a need, coming back to what you were talking about. I think there's a need to rewrite the curriculum for all this. I think there's a want and a need for it. I really do. I think there's a lot of people out there today that would love to be able to kind of have one place where they can go and say, okay, well, these are the things that have been explored over the years, and these are the things that I need to work on.
Yeah, and it starts with us. Well, not you and me, but I think it starts with the teachers.
No, it starts with us.
You're the harbingers of this. You listen to us. No, it's the teachers. It starts in the educational setting. It has to, because I think one of the things that propels my profession and what I do, my teaching practice, is everything I did not get as a student. I mean, I look back on, not that those teachers were bad teachers, they weren't. I mean, I remember my first instructor, Bill Jumper, was a great blues player. I learned a lot looking back on it. I didn't think it at the time, but looking back on his play, I'm like, wow, I picked up a lot of licks from him, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, I think these are musicians that are in the teaching studios that are just, giving us licks to work on and riffs to do. And I look back and say, wow, I wish he would have taught me this, or he would have taught me that, which is why I befriended. Funny, like thinking of the last 20 years, all of my best friends growing up were teachers. They were my teachers. I kind of got sort of close to them because they gave me stuff, that I was like kind of really hungry for, musically. And now that I'm doing it, now that I'm actually the guy giving the information out, I try to pull in from multiple angles and fields of study. So I think it's important that we kind of, in a way, redesign or rethink how we're presenting just certain material to the students up and coming. And yeah, I mean, I know what some are saying, that, it's like the kids have to be into it first. I don't know. I'm not sure if I agree with that. I think if you give them stuff that's interesting, I don't think it matters what it is, as long as it's interesting in a way that they can kind of gain something from. And apply, right?
No, I agree. I find that with a lot of my students, they just don't know what they want to play on, and yes, just giving them stuff that is a challenging and at least somewhat interesting to them. Because a lot of them, some when they come to me, what kind of music into? Well, I don't really listen to music. I was like, oh,
Then why are you here?
right. Well, well, that and okay, now it's my job to kind of help you along this journey to make it somewhat interesting. Um, and then it wouldn't be till, a couple years down the line where they actually start blossoming into this musician. And I had, it's satisfying knowing that I had a lot to do with that. So in terms of, like you said, them having an interest, I don't know that that exists because some of them just may not be exposed
Yeah,
to music
right,
the way that I was, or
right.
somebody else that has that passion from the get-go. You kind of have to create that passion.
I
Be-
remember years ago. I think this is when I was in Scranton, when had a studio up there,
Mm,
and this is before I met you at State College, and I had a student who was a surgeon, and he was probably in his 60s, and he did this. He never practiced,
mm.
never practiced, but man, he was one of the most dedicated students I ever had in terms of showing up.
Oh yeah.
Like he was with me for like 3 years. Every Friday he was there because that was his outlet
Yeah.
to sit with me even for 30 minutes and play guitar and kind of just like get it in a system was what he wanted. So yeah, I could have been like, oh well, you're not committing to this thing, but that was not the point for him.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
being a bit adaptable with our students too, like as you're saying.
Yeah. No, I have those students as well. I have a handful of adult students right now and actually two of them that I can think off the top of my head who have high stressful jobs. It's a way for them to get away from all of it for a half an hour and just kind of talk about music and enjoy what we're doing. And maybe sometimes we may even get 10 minutes of playing in. The rest of it is just chatting about stuff.
Which is valuable,
Yeah,
believe it or not, right? I mean, there's a lot. I didn't think it back
absolutely.
then. I never thought it back
Yeah.
then. I was like, they're just wasting their time and money. No, I don't think so. I think now, today, looking back, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of value in just
Oh,
sitting
yeah.
them and talking about musical
Yeah,
ideas.
absolutely. I was talking to the one of my adult students about how we actually go through the process of recording, and I showed him a multi-track and how it actually comes together, and he was mind blown. Like he actually went, on the radio and started listening to things differently. He comes back to me each week, very dedicated, always there. And he's like, I listen to music in a completely different way now, and this is such a great thing. And I'm like, see, that's
That's what
what
it's
I'm,
about.
yeah, that's what I'm
So
talking about right
I hear
there. It's so nice. And I've got on Wednesday nights, I've got an adult band. They're awesome.
how's
They're
that going?
Oh, it's great.
Yeah,
It's a good time. Now, again, we're all adults, so we don't get time to practice. So it's not as fast as I would like it. But that's okay too. We get together for an hour or so on Wednesday nights and go through tunes, and it's all right. It's pretty cool.
we don't do enough of that. I think we need to do more of that with just trying to train musicians coming up. And then, I even hate to use the word train anymore. I think it's a term that even sounds scary to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like just expose musicians to new things.
Yeah.
That's
But kind of into the technique things of guitarists, and I don't know what it is about guitarists and these three fingers. I mean, I guess I do because these two fingers and how they're connected back in here.
yeah,
So
yeah,
they have a hard time working independently.
right.
But for some odd reason, um, no matter what, everybody avoids this pinky, and it drives me up the wall.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well,
and I try to equate it to telling all my students, like, look, you have two arms and two legs. And if I were to take a machete and cut one of them off, you'd be handicapped. And essentially that's what you're doing, because life would be so much harder without a leg. You could still get things done efficiently, but not as efficiently if you were to have that other leg or an arm. And essentially, that's what you're doing by not using your pinky. You're handicapping yourself. You can get so much more done efficiently with four fingers.
yeah, but we don't grow. So okay, so we're just. I think what happens here is that it's partly sort of watching players play and getting conditioned to kind of do what they do through this kind of modeling thing. We kind of watch a lot of players, even guys like Jimmy, when he was playing, he was primarily this right here at the ring finger, really into the bending. So if you really want to break it down, technically speaking, you can probably say, these are the fingers that students and players use a lot. This is always for anchoring, and this is for your action and your executions and your bends and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned a long time ago that it's really, you can't see what I'm doing right now, but it's the metal sign, right? Because it's really interesting. This is the anchor, and fourth finger is really a powerful action finger. And I spent so many years working on every single finger having equal distribution of speed, equal distribution of flexibility and power. It's hard for me to imagine going back to being limited in a certain finger set. So like that. So like just real quick, what I'm doing is I'm kind of like laying my forearm right here. So I want to show this in a quick visual, but like you can see that you've seen me do this before, right? Where I'm just kind of tapping my second and fourth finger on a table, on like a surface of a table, quickly, independently, right? And controlling every single finger as if it were an independent unit, because the third and fourth finger are connected at the same tendon, right, as you were saying. So it's hard to move this guy without even, you can notice it now, right, where I'm moving it and my third finger kind of goes with it. So it's really hard to move that and gain the independence, which is why we do exercises to kind of put the power and the speed into the pinky finger. But I think when you're looking at the mechanics of a fretboard, if you want to call it, if that's a good word, right, how the fretboard really kind of operates and how we string scale shapes together, that fourth finger is got a lot of efficiency. It's not weak. Once you develop it, you can do a lot of movements. With
absolutely. That's why, that just baffles me that people avoid it, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, you have another finger that could.
Yeah, because they don't develop it. It's just it's a weak. I don't say it's a weak finger.
It is at first.
Yeah, at first it's very weak. Yeah, in relation to the strength of your third, of your ring finger, which everybody kind of relies on. And not to mention, like going back to last week, primarily every scale shape that guitar players get into are pentatonic driven. So just by the nature of the shaping, the topography of that scale on the fretboard, first and third finger, all the way down, right? Even like when you move to, the sixth, second, and first string, where the interval space is a minor third, right? 3 frets.
Right.
It's really set up to do first and fourth. But right, watching players play, they stretch the third finger out to get that minor third interval. So it's always 1 and 3 the whole way through that box pattern. And so over time, it just conditions to just do that. And there's, again, third finger bends are important, and they have a lot of power there.
Absolutely.
But the fourth is really the one that kind of gives you a lot of maneuverability.
Yeah, and like you were talking with your student going in, or no, it was in your legato video. Being able to do a 3-note per string run, your pinky plays such an important role. It's amazing how many people will try to do like a 3-note per string Ionian mode, and they're all over the place. And this idea I kind of keep on trying to stress to these students is that consistency is key. The more you do something the same, the less your brain has to make mistakes. If you do it the same way every single time, you become very efficient and very fluent in that. And so I try to get my students to kind of do this idea of, if you're gonna do it ascending, do it the exact same way descending. That's so important to make sure that you're consistent. And there's, how do you, when you go from on a 3-note per string and you start off on, let's just say G major, and you're doing a third, fifth, seventh fret, how do you approach a student that will use index on third fret and using their ring finger on fifth fret and then their pinky on seventh?
It's okay. So what I do is I tell them that the hand, and so the relation of the fingers to the fretboard should be uniform, as you just mentioned, should be the whole way through. So it becomes muscle memory. So that way you can focus in on phrasing and more artistic things, right? That's kind of the idea. But there is a certain instinct, I think, that that just feels better when it comes to 3-note patterns. And I should go on record to say that, you know, this just coming into this, that I am primarily a 3-note per string player. I've always been.
Right.
I like 3 notes per string for what I'm about to say. I think in a, let's map it out. So across the fretboard, you have, let's say, you know, you have 2 whole steps, 3 to 5, like 3rd fret to 5th fret, 5th fret to 7th fret. Okay, now the first finger gets the first of the 3. The pinky finger always gets the last of the 3. Okay, and then whatever fret interval comes into the center will be determined by the 2nd or the 3rd finger. Okay, so for me, like if I'm doing, you know, that same 2 whole step you know, run on one string, I'm using usually 1st, 2nd, and 4, because the 1st, 2nd, and 4, they just feel good to make that stretch for me. You can use 1st, 3rd, and 4, but again, that whole step space between 3rd and 4th does overtax the tendon. So I typically use 1, 2, and 4 on 2 whole steps. Okay. Now, if I'm using a half step followed by a whole step, let's say 4th fret, 5th fret, 7th fret, it's still the same thing, 1st, 2nd, and 4. But what I can do now is I can reverse it or invert it, let's say, if I have the inverse, which is now whole step, half step. So let's say 4, 6, and 7. Now I can use my 3rd finger, you know, effectively there. So for me, it all starts actually, which is one of the reasons why I start with chromatic exercises at the very beginning of any guitar lesson. Even my beginners who've never played before, I train them in chromatic studies, because for me, the chromatic fingers line up to the frets really beautifully. So what I think about doing is like each finger gets a fret space. So that way later, if I have to change the intervals and widen them or shorten them, the fingers don't really have to do any thinking. They just kind of move a bit, right? So if I'm coming from, let's say, you know, three half steps in a row, and each finger gets a fret assignment, right? Well, if I know that my first interval has to move to a whole step, I just move the first finger over a little bit. So it all comes from that core of a 4-finger chromatic, 4-note per string chromatic design, which comes out of there. So that's the way I approach it. If I saw a student come in and say, well, they're going to use the 1st and the 3rd between the whole step, for me, I don't look at that as wrong, because there are certain situations where that is correct. In pentatonic form, that is correct. We can use the 1st and 3rd finger with a whole step. So again, it goes back to what we're doing in a musical environment and how we approach it. I just want them to be more cognizant of how the fingers, you know, sort of line up to intervals across the neck. So that's the way I always do it. So again, 1st and 4th finger are my anchors, always my anchors.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you can't, you know, and then you start connecting scales together and, you know, linking runs. And in that legato lesson, I talked about how even slide positions, right, or sliding through positions, can actually go on both sides of the coin. So, you know, if your first finger, you're doing a descending slide, your first finger has to lead that. If you're using an ascending slide, I'm not using 3rd, I'm using my 1st to slide through, you know, and so it's all, again, related to that sort of that 4-finger, what's the word, that sort of equidistant arrangement of the 4 fingers across the board.
Right. No, makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And we got to get there. I think, you know, again, not everybody's going to be in a 3-note per string style. Not everybody's going to be kind of into the shredding, because I think that's been gone for many years too. But just having the flexibility to move across the board with any finger, there's a lot of benefit to that, even in chords, right? So if you're doing like a chord formation, how many times have you played chord extensions? Let's say we're playing something in your typical standard block, you know, bar chord formation, and you got to use your 4th finger to grab an extension, the 11th, let's say, or the 13th in the top, especially in jazz studies. Well, you know, you got to have that power and flexibility to move around. You know, and the one thing we never talk about, which is really important, I know you're not looking at my camera right now, but I have it up on the screen, is that you got to learn how to bend your fingers too, to create double stops. You know, and with all fingers, it's really easy to do with finger 1. So those who are watching right now, you can see that, let's say, imagine that I'm fretting a note with my 1st finger, and then I can, if I want to create, let's say, a double stop underneath the string, I just slightly bend my 1st finger. I'm not grabbing the whole thing, I'm just slightly bending. Well, imagine if you can do the same bend with your 4th finger. See, I'm doing it right now. Right, so if you can fret a finger and then grab a double stop with the pinky and grab 2 notes, I mean, these are things that when they come across in performance, and you hear this chord structure where all the notes are there the way you want them, and they're clean, by the way. They're not blocked, you know, they're not deadened. You know, it's like a big killer when you first start chord studies. You have this big kind of structure. People are like, wow, that chord sounds really articulate. Yeah, because I'm using really these sort of these micro movements of my hand that are in there. So important. Real quick, there was a book that was written by Frank Conroy, a fiction author, called Body and Soul, I believe is the name of it. I read it many, many years ago, and it's about this kid who was a piano prodigy. And it's a really good story. If you get a chance, want to read about a musical fiction tale about this kid who grows up as a pianist who's a prodigy, read this. But there was one scene in the tale that really I resonated with, and the teacher is telling him, saying, music is really about sort of the little things you do. It's about the little movements you make, right? So it even goes into micro movements in the fingertips, and how sometimes when you're playing, the little movements you make have subtleties that actually are amplified across the phrasing that you kind of get there. And the protagonist was like, oh, so it's all about like the little things you do. And it's like this big mind-blowing thing. And I do this exercise sometimes with students when I do the pendulum. You nurses are going, right?
Yeah, I know exactly.
I don't have one on me today or demonstrate it, but all you got to do is hold, you can make it, just get a string and hold a weight, to put a bolt on the end of it, and just hold it and actually anchor your hand on a tabletop and don't do anything. Just like hold it down there. But think about it going a certain way. This is not spooky paranormal stuff. This actually is the idiomotor response, which basically is your brain sends a signal to your fingertips, and little micro muscle movements happen to your fingertips, which is amplified across the string, which actually moves the pendulum in certain ways. So you see me do this, right? Where you can have it anchored steady. I think about it moving from left to right, and it just starts moving from left to right. I think about it moving in a circle, it starts moving in a circle. You can all try that. It's not magic. It's actually micro movements in your fingers. So I do that as a way to kind of show students that, you might see these four fingers, as doing a certain thing on the surface, but really on the string, you have a lot of subtleties, a lot of minute movements that really have a lot of tremendous impact on the sound that you're kind of getting to, which is why I think tone is in the fingers. Right. Eric Johnson talks with us all the time, that it doesn't matter what pedals you're plugging into, it has a little bit to do with that, right, in your amps, but it's about how you touch the string. Yeah. The character you give and how the little things you do on a string that actually resonate and amplify in your signal. So that's something I would encourage all players even to start thinking about, is like, are the little details important you're playing? Absolutely. They have tremendous impact.
Yeah. I would encourage all players, and I understand I went through a phase myself, but to get rid of all your pedals. And when you're practicing, play clean. Practice.
Yeah.
100%.
Sure. Don't bear, well, in the initial stages, don't bury yourself in stuff in your signal chain. Just don't saturate your sound with gain and delay and chorus and flange. Take it all out, start playing cleanly on a clean signal, and then later you realize that stuff is used for color.
Right. Exactly.
It's just used for color. It's all it really is, or for effect. But even those players know that it's really designed to not be a crutch for things that are wrong in your technique.
Yeah, most of your tone, like you said, comes out of your fingers or your pick.
Agreed.
That's where it is. That's where it's at.
Agreed. And the lesson I did with Alton, we talked about the right hand adaptive style. And it's something that even I'm noticing now, where I don't use a pick anymore. I just don't. I know there's a lot of value and a lot of effect that comes in that pick material, but I really, really like being malleable in this right hand and being able to kind of try different things with different finger. Like I remember doing something yesterday where like I was my string was underneath the corner of my first finger on my right hand, and that had a tonal variance depending if I use that or if I use the backside of the fingernail. It was really weird. The way I attacked the string changed the timbre. Now maybe these like small things that only I would notice, but I did notice a timbral effect. And I noticed once I got that timbral change, I can play with that. I can manipulate that in some way.
Yeah. When did you, like, going back to what we were talking about, when did you start thinking about all of, when was the crossover for you when you started? Because you said back in the beginning you were acoustic player, and then we got into electric guitar. When did you start thinking about guitar in more depth?
Yes. I would say when I started teaching.
Yeah.
It's really weird. Like I believe this wholeheartedly too. If you want to learn anything, teach it.
Don't I know it?
right?
Yeah.
Because when you teach it, you have to know it. You know, and you have to be able. And the funny thing is, like, we don't know everything. I mean,
No
there's
one
nobody.
does.
Yeah, the information field is immense. There's no way, right? But if you're going to purport to know a certain kind of topic, let's say like timbre on a string, well, yeah, there's no better way to show what you don't know than try to present it to another person and have them understand that. So I think it was probably around when I really started getting into teaching heavily. And I remember I've been teaching guitar since 16 or 17 years old when I first was an apprentice teacher to my instructors. That's how I got started in the business, right? But it was when I probably opened the first of the schools, which was, I would say, the one before ours, before we got to Black Note.
Yeah.
But certainly when we were in Black Note, that was the beginning of that, because I didn't have students that were into the stuff we talk about yet, but I think that my mind was going there,
Right.
as a player and as a performer. And certainly now, so I would say probably recently, I would say 20 years, I was really into it when I got into why we do certain things we do. And like all things, I think it's not a matter of just happy accident. It was sort of in the conversations that we have with our students, things emerge, they pop out of nowhere, like, holy shit.
Yeah.
This is, yeah, that's what's going on. And then right? I mean, how many times have you had those lessons with your students where it's like something new just emerges and you're like, what is that? Oh, that's what that thing is. That's really cool. Let's examine that more.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I really enjoyed those years, is because we did definitely open things up beyond a conversation that I'd normally had with any other teacher at that point. It was just enjoyable to be able to open up concepts and dig in really deep, and apply them, and at the same time have a group of other like-minded musicians be able to kind of join in on that journey. That was very enjoyable.
Yeah, we're like the ancient Greece of guitar players.
Right?
Like Socrates and Plato, that and everybody watching. No, in all seriousness, I think I agree with you. I think it was that period. I don't know how you feel with this, but I think that period was pretty special. Because it was, looking back on it, we were like digging hard.
Heck yeah, on a daily basis, if not hourly.
Yeah, it was, and
then we'd be exhausted and we'd go play video games.
Yeah. And what has changed? Nothing.
Right.
But the students were into it. I think that's we shouldn't lose that, and I don't think we do. And I think it's something that we have to keep propagating.
Yeah, absolutely.